Hey girls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and for today's vlog, I am going to be reading three very hyped, very anticipated for me horror books. I am very excited to do this vlog. I absolutely love horror, and I knew I wanted to do an entire dedicated horror themed reading vlog for the month of October. Horror is one of my favorite genres, so I knew that the three books that I was going to be picking for this vlog should all be books that are very highly anticipated for me, books that I've heard great things about, and then also just books that I feel like are just genuinely going to be creepy. So I am very excited to get to all three of these books in this vlog. I've got a good assortment of definitely some backlog books, and then ones that have been out for almost a decade, and then all the way to books that haven't actually come out yet. So I'm very excited to be reading these three books in this vlog, so I'm just gonna go ahead and talk about all three of these books that I'm very excited to read this week. The first book that I picked for this horror vlog is an author that I have not read as much as I have wanted to from, and I feel like this author is very iconic. I feel like they're becoming very iconic in the horror sort of writing sphere. I feel like when you think of horror, especially in the last couple of years, this is one of the authors that automatically comes to mind. So the first book I'm going to be reading is The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, I have talked before on this channel how I am usually drawn to larger tomes rather than shorter stories, short form work. However, Stephen Graham Jones, everything that I've read from him has been very short, but very impactful, genuinely creepy. So I knew that I wanted to include him in this vlog, and definitely I wanted to choose The Last Final Girl because I really love the final girl trope. I think all of the books that I've read that have had to deal heavily with that trope and are like very self-referential, including the title, I've really enjoyed. Final Girls by Riley Sager, The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. Now The Last Final Girl, I'm hoping to love this one as much as I enjoyed those other titles. So with most of Stephen Graham Jones' work, it is very short. I think this one just reaches 200 pages. I don't want to know too much going into it. The tagline for this one is "Life in a slasher film is easy. You just have to know when to die." And then on the front cover it says, "You screamed with Scream, you dressed up for Halloween, you went camping on Friday the 13th, and you stayed awake for Nightmare on Elm Street. Now shimmy into that skirt, pick up whatever blade's handy. It's time for The Last Final Girl." So that's gonna be the first book I'll be reading during this vlog. Next up for this iconic horror vlog, we have one that I'm just gonna guess is iconic because I have actually seen the movie adaptation, and I absolutely love it. I think it is true like early 2000s iconic horror in terms of movies, so I'm very excited to pick this book up, and that would be Ring by Koji Suzuki, and this is about The Ring. I feel like The Ring is a very popular movie, at least one that a lot of people know about. I'm very excited to dive into this book. I'm gonna be honest, it did take me a while to realize that The Ring was actually a book before it was a movie. I was in 4th grade when this book came out, at least this edition of this book. It says copyright 2004, so dating myself very exactly. But this is the novel that spawned the whole entire movie franchise. This is about a mysterious videotape that once you watch it, you die in 7 days. Unless you manage to break the curse, crack the code, if you watch this video, you'll die in 7 days. So I'm very excited to pick this one up. I do absolutely love the movie. I think it's one of the horror movies that I have seen the most. I just really enjoy it. So I'm interested to see. I haven't actually seen the original. I have seen the American remake. So I think it would be cool if I could get my hands on the original movie to watch that and then read this in the same week. That would be cool, but I'm very excited to read this, kind of see what differs from the movie, what kind of stays the same in terms of plot. Yeah. I'm very excited about this one. And then last but not least, we have a book that at the time I'm filming this has not come out yet, but one of my coworkers won it in a giveaway and then gave it to me because she knows that I love horror, so I have a really cool job. But this is an author that is fairly recent. I think both of their works came out or are coming out this year. And I have heard that this specific book is Hill House for this century. So Hill House is very iconic. I'm excited. There's nothing like more iconic to me than a good haunted house tale. So the third book in this vlog is going to be Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw, and this one is a gorgeously creepy haunted house tale steeped in Japanese folklore. It's about an abandoned mansion, and its foundations rest on the bones of a bride, and its walls are packed with the remains of the girls sacrificed to keep her company. It's the perfect venue for a group of thrill-seeking friends brought back together to celebrate a wedding. So if that doesn't sound like the ultimate classic setup of a very creepy night and a very creepy ghost story, also this cover very disturbing in a great way. So that is going to be the third book that I will be reading this week. I do read horror year-round, but just because it is October, I wanted to make sure that I picked books from subgenres within the genre itself that I tend to really enjoy. So we've got that final girl trope, which I absolutely love, even though I can be very hit or miss on slashers. But Stephen Graham Jones has very like creepy whimsical ways of incorporating horror and changing around like tired tropes. So we've got that going, and then we also have two like very creepy paranormal sort of books as well. I'm very excited to go ahead and get this reading vlog started. I think I'm going to be starting with Nothing But Blackened Teeth, just because it is the shortest. I'm really craving a good horror novel. Last week I read a lot of dark academia, so those were like more slower paced. This one's very short. I feel like it's just going to be very faster paced horror, so very intrigued for this one. This will be the very first book that I read for this vlog. I'm just very excited for a very spooky week full of horror, so without further ado, let's just go ahead and get to reading. I will check back in with you all in the next clip. So very first update of the vlog, I have actually finished one book because I did read it in a single sitting. That would be Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. This one is only 120 something pages, 124 pages. So I actually ended up coming home after work yesterday and just sitting down and deciding to start this one. And the pacing for this one, this is a very short book, and it's also very like speedy because there's not a lot of pages to get through the story. So I read it all in one sitting. It was perfectly horrifying. It is very short. So I don't know how much I want to give about the synopsis for this one, because I just know going into this one that this is a very creepy ghost story that takes place in Japan. We have a group of young, very unlikable characters, and they all traveled to Japan to stay at this haunted, abandoned building, and they're staying the night, and creepy things happen to them because this house is in fact haunted by some very real ghosts. So I really enjoyed this one. I would say, I know it isn't out yet. I was very lucky to read this before it released. I don't have a lot to say about this one. I did really enjoy it. I will be definitely checking out more by this author. I think this would be the perfect Halloween read, and specifically like Halloween itself, if you wanted a very short, very creepy ghost ghost story to read on Halloween, then this one was really good. I definitely think you can read it in one sitting. I think that's probably ideal for this one to be read in one sitting. It's a cast of unlikable characters all trapped in a haunted house, so if you like those tropes in horror fiction, I think you'll really enjoy this one. And then moving on, I did get some very exciting book mail yesterday as well, and that would be my pre-order for The Death of Jane Lawrence came in the mail, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and add this one to the vlog because I cannot wait. The Death of Jane Lawrence is one of my most anticipated releases. I pre-ordered this one quite some time ago. I'm very excited to dive into it. I have heard that it is very much like Crimson Peak. It is a gothic horror story with some supernatural elements, so I'm looking forward to that. One of the blurbs or the praise for on the back of this one says, with The Death of Jane Lawrence, Caitlin Starling establishes herself as a queen of gothic horror. So I am very excited to dive into this one. I love gothic horror. I'm not going to read it just yet, but I am adding it to the vlog because I just know myself. I'm not going to be able to have this sitting on my shelf unread for too long. So we are adding one more book to this vlog. The book that I'm actually going to pick up is Ring by Koji Suzuki, and I am very excited for this one. I have been watching a lot of horror recently. I rewatched Nightmare on Elm Street last night, and they're not related at all, but much like The Ring, Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the first adult horror movies that I ever watched, so that just really got me wanting to pick The Ring, or sorry, this is just Ring up next. So I'm very excited to start this one. This one is definitely thicker than the last book, so it probably won't take me just one sitting to read it. I'll have to spend some more time with it. I definitely don't try and do this, but I have noticed usually when I have watched a movie that's based on a book and then I read the book afterwards, I tend to like both experiences more than if I just read the book and then watch the movie. I feel like that way there's more chance to be disappointed, at least for me. So I've already seen this movie. I'm going to try and see if I can get my hands on the original and not the English version, because I just think that would be really fun to watch the original movie as well, and then also pick up this book. It is Friday night in October, perfect time to pick up another spooky book. I will check back in probably around the midway point and let you all know what I'm thinking of this one. So I'm back. I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is I am about 60% of the way through The Ring. The bad news is I'm not enjoying this. I said at the beginning of this vlog, I have been waiting to read this all year, specifically because I have seen the American remake of The Ring. It was one of the very first horror movies that I did watch. It's one of my favorites. For nostalgia purposes, I really do love it as a movie. And pretty much everything that I liked about the movie is not present in this book. So we are not starting on a great note. I would say starting, I'm 60% of the way through it. I will say the writing style is fairly easy to get through, even though I'm not enjoying this as much as I thought I would. It's definitely a fast-paced read, and honestly that is probably because I am so familiar with the basic premise of the story from having seen the movie, even though it is a little bit different. So there's that. So bare bones plot of this one, this is about a newspaper reporter, and he discovers that his niece has tragically died. She was very young, senior in high school, and she dies very mysteriously, very eerily, without explanation. You can't explain it. She, however, he figures out is not the only person to have died that very same day war weekend. 3 other students around her age have also died, very mysteriously and almost paranormal, like they feel very off. So he goes to try and find out what has caused her death. And I'm trying to think of if this is a spoiler or not, because I mean, it does take a good 70 pages to get into this part, but I feel like it's definitely, especially if you're in the horror community, like the movie is very big. So I don't think it's a spoiler, but he figures out that she, a week before she died, watched this very eerie, creepy video. At the end of it, it says, "You will die in 7 days after seeing this video." He thinks it's a hoax. He watches this video and starts to believe, actually, that the video is what killed his niece and all these other people. So now he only has 7 days, and he has to try and figure out how to break this curse, how to maybe stop this video from killing him and other people who may have watched it, and also figure out who created this video in the first place and why. I will say the biggest thing from the book to the movie that I would say is the most impactful: the narrators are very different. Our main character that we follow, I think in the movie, is a whole lot more compelling and just feels like more emotionally connected. I feel like there's a lot more emotional attachment that character has to the story than our male main character here. Whether that be something that may be getting a little bit lost in translation, because I have seen on several reviews of this that it is not the best translated work. It's not the best translation of this book, so unfortunately I can't read it how it was initially intended to be written. So I'm probably losing a lot of nuance there, but also just this main character just seems very disconnected from everything that's going on. I don't know. I'm not enjoying it. There's another secondary main character that is just awful and is very, very different in the movie. Spoiler alert / trigger warning alert, and also just as an aside, I do leave comprehensive lists in the description box of my video for every single trigger for all of the books mentioned in my videos if you need them. But this one is very bizarre because the secondary character in the movie The Ring that helps our main character is like a very likable person. At least I think so. In the book, he is god-awful. Again, spoiler / trigger warning. He is a rapist, and this isn't really addressed, at least so far from where I'm in it. It's just like a quirky little fact about this reporter's best friend is that he's a rapist, and this friend knows it, has never reported it. They both just talk about it as if it's like a fact, like, oh, this is my best friend, he hates broccoli, his favorite color is blue. Like, that's how they talk about this. I don't know what the f that is about, or if it's ever going to be addressed. It really doesn't feel like it. So this did come out in 1990. And it just feels a little old, and I'm kind of going to be glad to finish this. I am going to finish it. There's just a lot of things where I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, I understand why this makes such a compelling movie, and I'm really liking the movie better than the book at this point. I know this is a series of books. I think it's a trilogy of books. I probably won't read the second two. I'll probably just finish this one and be done. And I will say the main premise of like this really creepy haunted videotape, like the tape itself, it's way better done, obviously, in the movie than the book, because movies are inherently visual. So as you're describing every single thing that's happening, you don't get, like, it's not a movie with a narrative, it's just a series of very disconcerting images and sounds, which obviously make better sense in a movie because you can actually watch the movie within the movie and then also hear the sounds and all the other visual things that make it so eerie. So yeah, this is a surprise, and not in a good way. I'm kind of bummed, but hopefully I can turn it around a little bit. I mean, especially if his friend's behavior gets addressed at all. because I'm gonna be honest, that's my biggest issue. Kind of, I guess, another spoiler for the book versus the movie. In the movie, I don't want to spoil the movie, even though it's really old, because it is really good, and you haven't seen it yet, you definitely should. The secondary character and the main character, both of them are very likable, and I think that is very important in this type of ghost story. I feel like sometimes in like slasher movies, the characters don't have to be so likable because you know they're on like a limited time, and the secondary character in the movie is just so different and just such a likable character. And then just to see the actual secondary character in this one be introduced and then immediately get like that life story from him, just a bummer. I just don't like it at all. Again, if they address it, that will make me feel better about it, but at this point it really doesn't feel like that's part of the story at all. It's just like a fun fact about his friend, which is appalling. So that's been honestly the scariest part about this book for me. Again, I don't know if it's just because I have seen the movie before, so I know roughly like how events are going to take place or whatever, but I'm hoping to finish this today. I'll get back with you with my final thoughts, but it is not looking so good at the moment, which is a bummer. But yeah, I'll check back in with you all when I have finally finished this one. So I finished The Ring and it did not get better. Unfortunately, it actually got a little bit worse. So yeah, and I would say that was largely because of the same reasons that I talked about in my mid-book update for this one. It kind of got worse in some aspects and just definitely didn't get better. So that was very frustrating to read at times. Also, just like weird rapey misogyny themes aside, I honestly think this story just translates a whole lot better to a movie just because it is largely following a videotape and something that you have to watch to experience. And again, I love books. I think that they are so powerful. I'm a person who, when I'm reading, I see like a full movie in my head, but I definitely think, especially for this one, I don't know if it's just also a little bit because of my nostalgia for this movie, but I just feel like the whole watching the videotape concept works a lot better as a film, just because I remember watching this one for the first time. I watched it with one of my friends in the basement of my childhood home, and you actually see like clips of the videotape along with our main characters. And once the movie was over, there was like a little bit, I can't remember how old I was. I want to say maybe 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere around that age bracket. And I just remember being a little freaked out in the back of my head thinking, so I actually did watch this videotape. Ooh, that's not real. Like, just because you actually do experience the videotape with the main character, I remember that lingering feeling of unease after the movie ended. Again, that could maybe just be more of a personal connection that I had, and also that I was a lot younger and more scared by horror. And like now I'm a lot older than I was when I watched the movie, and so maybe already just knowing what's going to happen here, not reading this premise for the first time, and then also having read so much horror, not as easily affected. So yeah, I thought the movie was better than the book, and in a lot of ways. This is a trilogy I will not be continuing on. I did think, the one thing that I did think this one was very interesting when it discussed at the very end of this book, I will say, the implications that this tape has for mankind. I thought that discussion was very creepy, and I felt like touched upon more than the movie did, at least the movie version that I watched. So I will say that for this one, but other than that, this was just a struggle to get through, and I don't think, had I not already like watched the movie, had such a loving connection to this movie, that I would have finished this. Probably would have DNF'd this one very early. So unfortunately, a total miss for me. I'm hoping that the next book is going to be better. The next book that I am going to pick up is The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones, and this one is life in a slasher film is easy, you just have to know when to die. Lindsay chooses a host of virgins, misfits, and former final girls to replace the slaughtered members of her original homecoming court. It's not just a fight for survival, it's a fight to become the last final girl. That's the synopsis that you have on the back. Not really sure what's going on there. Very intrigued to find out. And actually, when I was flipping through this one, it actually looks like it's kind of written in like a screenplay sort of way. So it is divided up into acts, and the way that this is written, it's very much like a movie. You get directorial kind of notes. So I'm gonna actually read like a little portion of the first page to kind of explain what I mean about the writing style. We back off so we can see through the new wedge carved out of his neck. So we can see the blonde girl framed by it, her bikini top splattered with blood and gore, her chin moving with her mouth trying for a word, but nothing. The screen doesn't fade to black. It slams there, takes us with it, takes it straight to a girl's voice, shaky like this is a second try. I guess it probably started when that Halloween supply truck crashed off the road. Beat, beat. I didn't even know there were Halloween trucks, right? Nervous laughter, the weepy kind, then close on this voiceover girl's delicate white fingers, twining her short blonde hair. So I have a feeling this is going to be formatted in a very interesting way. I'm very intrigued. I've had a lot of success in the past with other books that have tackled the final girl trope in horror movies, and everything that I've read from Stephen Graham Jones I have really enjoyed. So I have high hopes for this one. This one is shorter. It's not as short as Nothing But Blackened Teeth, but it just hits over 200 pages. It's 206 pages. So I'll probably check back in at like the 100 page mark, and then again check back in when I'm done with this one. I'm hoping we can kind of raise the bar a little bit from The Ring and hopefully enjoy this one a whole lot more. All right, so I'm back with a reading update. I finally finished The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm actually not sure if I updated the vlog at all during my time reading this. I think this is my first update for this book, and I have finished it, which it is on the shorter side. It's only about 200 pages, maybe a little less than 200 pages. It's definitely a very speedy read, so I did enjoy this. I enjoyed this a lot more than The Ring, which thank God. And I will say, I do think this one, I'm kind of glad I finished it a couple of days ago, and I'm just now getting around to talking about it. I actually think that really helped me think of my thoughts about this specific book, because it is written in a very interesting format. I wouldn't necessarily suggest the audiobook unless like you are a person who never gets lost in audiobooks, like really is like an audiobook person. I did try the audiobook and it just ended up, which I thought it would be a really good match because this is pretty much written like a screenplay. It's almost as if you are reading someone describing a movie to you. So not only do you have the dialogue, but you have like the camera angles. Sometimes it will just give you like a actor's name who is playing the character in this movie, which is actually a book. So very interesting writing style, which I thought would translate really well to audiobook. And I did try the audiobook and I just ended up getting very confused. So I did primarily read this physically. I would probably suggest you do that as well. Like most Stephen Graham Jones books, I feel pretty comfortable saying this because I have now read multiple things by this author. He takes a very, I would say like a very standard horror trope or horror scenario where you think you know exactly what's going to happen. Like this is about the last final girl. It's obviously going to be about slashers. And for most of this does feel like very much like an iconic teen slasher movie. And then by the end, there's just some crazy wild twists that it's like the ending is just like jaw-dropping with just how fast-paced it goes. And that's, I feel like, been the case for everything that I've read by him. Like, and I'm not saying cliche or like standard. I'm not saying that as an insult, but definitely the beginning, you think you're on one journey and you're going down that road and all of a sudden it's a sharp right turn into some bizarre scenario. So I do really enjoy this author. I think if you really enjoy slasher movies, I would say, if you really enjoy like the slasher genre, especially in terms of movies, I feel like this is a book that is definitely going to be like for the movie minded. There are so many references in here and I would consider myself someone who has seen a lot of horror movies. Even if I haven't seen specific horror movies, I know enough about the genre to kind of see references and understand them. When I hear them, there were so many in here, I could tell that some were definitely references. I just didn't know what to. So chock full of references and it's very self-aware. Like it's self-aware horror. I would almost say The Cabin in the Woods, like that sort of self-aware slasher horror bizarreness. I would say if you got along with that movie pretty well, you'll get along with this book pretty well. I really enjoyed it and I was pretty surprised by how much I actually enjoyed like our main character. She's not very likable by any means and she's definitely like not the traditional final girl in this scenario. I don't want to give too much away. I think I gave a brief synopsis at the beginning of this book, but I had a really enjoyable time reading this one and I've just recently been watching a lot of classic horror, classic slashers. So The Last Final Girl was like a real perfect accompaniment to those movies. This was just a whole lot of fun. So overall, this was a really enjoyable reading experience. I have not been let down by a single Stephen Graham Jones book yet. And now we're gonna move on to the final girl of this video. And that is going to be The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I'm just so excited for this one. One of my most anticipated releases. As I'm filming this clip, it is mid-October, so I just feel like it is the perfect time of year to dive into this one. This has been compared heavily with, at least I've been getting a lot of ads for it, even on Instagram, which is pretty neat. This has been compared heavily to Ninth House and Crimson Peak. Love both of those, so I'm very excited about this one. I believe that this is actually the biggest book out of all of these. It was a last minute ad for me. I was initially planning on just reading those three, which I'm kind of glad that I am adding this on just because I've had like a rougher time filming this video than I thought, just because of some disappointments. And when I say disappointments, I pretty much mean just The Ring. The other two I did enjoy. I have read both The Luminous Dead and Yellow Jessamine by this author, and quite honestly, they were both books that, like, if they're not like my favorite books of all time, but they're like very, very close on the list. I just really enjoy this author's writing style, and I just really, really love the things that this author does with the gothic horror subgenre. So I'm very excited to dive into this one. I'm gonna go ahead, start reading this, and I will check back in with another update soon. Alright, so let's talk The Death of Jane Lawrence. I have gotten pretty much halfway through this one, and I'm really happy to say that I am loving it so far. This is definitely the biggest book, I think, of this TBR, and if not the biggest, it's definitely on par with The Ring, but I would say the pacing is very, very different. Definitely Crimson Peak vibes with this one. I mean, the author has said herself it is intentional. It is supposed to give off a Crimson Peak type of vibe. She was heavily inspired by it. So, you know, I feel like if you've seen that movie, kind of gauge on the type of horror that that was, and the almost type of like gothic romance that that also was, and then decide, like, if you hated Crimson Peak as a movie, I don't think you're going to like this book. Likewise, I really don't think if you didn't like Mexican Gothic, I don't think you'll like this one either, just because I think the pacing very, very similar. I loved Mexican Gothic, and I'm loving this one, and this is very slow paced. It's very gothic horror, and I'm just loving every single moment of it so far. So we're following our main character, Jane, and at the beginning of this book, she is kind of put in a situation where she has to get married. Like, I think both of Caitlin Starling's works before. I'm trying to remember The Luminous Dead, but I know especially Yellow Jessamine, they're not our world, they're worlds adjacent to ours. So even though this is set in kind of like a gothic setting, and when you read this, you will definitely be put in like the same sort of era as, like, think of movies like Crimson Peak or Woman in Black. You're definitely put in that era, but it's a different world. The names of places are a little bit different, which I think is a really interesting way of doing historical fantasy, historical horror, any type of historical fiction, and kind of changing it just enough so that it is a unique setting, but it's also a familiar setting. You don't have to spend too much time with world building. So I do really like that. That's just an aside. It's not really a big part of this, but Jane is finding herself needing to marry because that's just what women have to do in this time period. She's very smart. She looks at every single eligible bachelor in this town and figures out the exact right one for her based on what she believes is going to be a marriage of convenience. She meets this doctor. She sets it out like saying, hey, you don't even have to like me. This would just be like a mutual business decision. Doesn't have to be romantic. Like, we can be essentially business partners and it'll benefit us both. So he agrees to that, and they end up getting married, and it's supposed to be a marriage of convenience. They have both agreed to that. The now Jane Lawrence, because she is married, Dr. Lawrence, slowly realizes that the situation is not at all what she had planned it to be. She's a very meticulous person. She does like bookkeeping. She did bookkeeping for her previous benefactors, and now she had wanted to do it for Dr. Lawrence. She's slowly learning that both of them might be fighting attraction for each other, which would normally be fine, but they entered into this as a business transaction. So feelings really complicate things, as well as Dr. Lawrence has a very strange, secretive past involving a crumbling old manor house that his family has owned for a while that she is not allowed to stay in after dark. And of course, like any good gothic horror setup, Jane finds herself, even though there are stipulations she cannot stay at this house after dark, she's really not even supposed to stay in this house at all. Situations happen, she is staying at this house and discovers that there is a lot of very creepy, possibly paranormal things happening in this manor. So that is the basic setup to this, and I am just really enjoying it so far. It's just got such a creepy vibe. This is like such a perfect book for the fall. It definitely feels, it has such a beautiful gothic atmosphere. I absolutely love it. I'm absolutely a fan of that entire gothic sort of subgenre. I especially like when it is very creeping and slow, unsettling horror taking place with one main character pretty much, and kind of dealing with isolation as a ghost itself. The ghosts in an old Victorian manor trope, just, I love it every single time pretty much. So I'm really enjoying this book. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Again, I'm about the halfway point right now. Everything that I just like explained about this book is pretty much set up within the first couple of chapters, and it's also on the dust jacket. It's been marketed like so I don't think there's spoilers. I'm starting to get into territory that is not covered in the synopsis of this book, so I'm very excited to kind of see what happens from here. And I've also heard that the second half of this takes such a bizarre turn, but in a good way. So again, I feel like Mexican Gothic kind of also had, it was very traditionally Gothic and then had some wild endings, which I really enjoyed. So we'll have to kind of see if this has a similar feel where it's very slow horror and then it's like all in your face explosive bombshell sort of horror. So I'm very excited. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and it's like a very good weekend book. This weekend really has been the first weekend where it kind of feels like fall outside, and so this has just been like the perfect atmospheric book to really celebrate the changing of seasons. I just absolutely love Gothic horror all year round, but especially like at the beginning of like the fall season, fall weather. I'm really enjoying this, but I haven't finished it yet, so I will check back in with you all later. I'm anticipating probably finishing this today. I am really liking it. I think even though it is very slow paced, it's a fast read for me because I'm very invested and I want to see what happens next. So I'll be finishing this soon, and I will check back in with you all when I'm finished with it. So last night I finished The Death of Jane Lawrence, and I really loved this one. Thankfully, the last book in the vlog ended up being my favorite. I really enjoyed this one. If you like Gothic literature, I would highly recommend. I thought this stayed so true to the tropes that, you know, if you love Gothic fiction, that if you like those tropes, they're in here, they're done really well, but also with some new spins on things and just like enough new content blended with the old to make someone who likes Gothic fiction very happy. I feel like with this book, I really loved it. The ending to this one was absolutely wild. I think the second to last chapter I went through and read twice because if you read this one, when you get to that part, you'll know it gets very confusing, not in a bad way, just written in such like a dreamy, mystical, wild quality that I just wanted to make sure that I really understood everything that was going on. This is definitely one that I would recommend you reading the author's note and acknowledgements at the end. It at least helped me kind of understand a little bit more what happened at the end of the intentionally kind of ambiguous ending. As well as this one, I was going through reviews after I finished this one because I thought I knew what was happening, but I wanted to make sure that what I thought had happened at the end, like other people were roughly on the same page about. This one, I will say, if you are not a fan of ambiguous endings, or if any sort of confusing endings, if those are like deal breakers for you, I probably wouldn't recommend this one. That being said, I absolutely loved it. I really love, as a reader, having enough to where I feel confident enough to say I know what happened at the end, but also to draw my own conclusions. I thought this was really, really well done, and I highly enjoyed everything by this author. I have loved, so I'm very glad I got to read this. This is the perfect book, perfect gothic horror for spooky season, for Halloween. If you are looking for an incredibly atmospheric, sort of like gothic romance sort of horror read, I would highly recommend this one. So that brings us to the end of the vlog. I completed 4 books in this vlog, 4 like very iconic, at least to me, horror books, or ones that I feel like are going to be on everyone's radar, should be on everyone's radar. So from my least favorite to my most favorite, the least favorite out of this vlog, no surprises here, was The Ring by Koji Suzuki. I just did not vibe with this book whatsoever. I honestly think that this was a premise that the changes that were made to make it into a movie made it a better story. I will say also the positive reviews for this one, I noticed also tended to say that the movie was just as good, if not better. I know this is a trilogy, and I believe the other 2 books in this trilogy are, I don't think they've been adapted into any sort of movie. So if you're very interested in that, I think I've seen the other 2 get better potentially. So if you can muscle your way through a, at least to me, not so great book to get to the other installations in the series, they might be better. This for me was just excellent concept with just not so great writing to me, and I just generally liked the movie better, which doesn't always happen, but when it does, I'm okay with that. I just really did not get along with this book. Also, that being said, again, all the trigger warnings, like a list of trigger warnings for each book, will be listed in my description box down below. Horror tends to have a lot just based on the content and like the emotions it's trying to evoke from you, so there will be that in the description bar below in case you need any of that information before diving into these books. But yeah, unfortunately this one, I think this one was the one that in my head I just kind of assumed at least I would like it, if not potentially it'd be one of my new favorites. So bummer that this is at the bottom, but that's where it stands. Next up, we have The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. And I do want to preface this by saying that even though this is my like second to least favorite in this vlog, I enjoyed this a lot more than I enjoyed The Ring. They're not really like on the same sort of playing field or like enjoyment. I really enjoyed this one. This one just, it was very hard to get into. At times the writing style, while really cool and really unique, got very confusing for me. I wouldn't recommend the audiobook. I do think you push past the very confusing writing style because this is written like a screenplay with camera angles and like camera directions and like acting choices in there. So very weirdly written. It was a very bold narrative choice to take that I think worked really well when it worked, and then when it didn't work, it didn't really work, if that makes sense. But I really enjoyed this one. This was very much, I would say, if you love slasher movies, I would recommend giving this a shot because it really does feel like a very classic sort of 90s slasher movie. If you like teen slashers, this definitely felt like that. I had a lot of fun. The ending really snuck up on you because this one, you don't like the characters and you don't really feel a connection to any of the characters. At least I didn't until the end, and I realized that I did have some sort of connection to some of the characters. Very wild, very bizarre time. I did enjoy this though. Just not my favorite Stephen Graham Jones, and definitely not one that I would recommend you start off with this author, just because because the writing style is just so different, I probably would have DNF'd this just because, again, it was hard to get into, but I knew as someone who had read Stephen Graham Jones before that I wouldn't be disappointed, and I wanted that payoff at the end. However, I would recommend like maybe Night of the Mannequins. I think that's a great first, I think it's a novella introduction to Stephen Graham Jones' work. Highly enjoyed that. If you did enjoy that one, if you've read that one, I think you will like this one as well. Next up on my list, we have Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I really enjoyed this one. My only critique, I guess I would say, of this one was that this is just over 100 pages. It was very short. I always feel bad saying that as a critique for something that was intentionally written to be in the short form. It really had me transfixed from beginning to end. I sat down and read this in a single sitting. I really enjoyed it. I will be looking for more of Cassandra Khaw's work. I really enjoyed the Japanese inspirations and ghost stories from this. If you like the sort of tropes and the plot devices of a group of people going to a haunted location that they don't think is haunted and then haunted things start happening, I think you'll really enjoy this one. This one also I think would be perfect if you're looking for something to start and finish on Halloween. I think this is a very creepy ghost story. Again, I just wish it were longer because I wanted to spend more time at this very creepy house with these very unlikable characters. I think this also had a lot to do with the trope that like hell is also other people, and the true horror is like people themselves, as well as being very paranormal. I enjoyed this one. I'll be looking for more by this author. Definitely, hopefully they write more in the horror sphere because this was very unsettling. And then saving the best for last, of course, we do have The Death of Jane Lawrence by Starling. If you haven't read anything by this author yet, highly recommend, because I have loved all three things that I've read by this author, and I feel like the books are different enough that if, for example, if you don't like gothic horror, you might want to steer clear from this one, because I think as someone who loves gothic horror, gothic literature in general, this is like god tier gothic horror. However, if you don't like gothic horror, The Luminous Dead is like a very sci-fi sort of futuristic horror that takes place. The main character is isolated and spelunking in underground, sometimes underwater caves. Very horrifying as well. So definitely, I think this is going to be a horror author to watch. Starling has 3 things out. Highly enjoyed all of them. Yellow Jessamine, I would say, also kind of gives off sort of like a Victorian Gothic vibe. I believe that is a short story or a novella. I can't remember. I listened to the audiobook and I think it was about 2 to 3 hours long, so not too long. But I just think that, especially with my reading tastes, the things that Starling keeps coming out with, I'm just so excited to see what she does next. I really enjoyed this one. I think the Crimson Peak comparison's spot on. If you also liked Mexican Gothic, highly recommend this one as well. I'm so excited to see like this new resurgence of Gothic horror, because I absolutely love the genre and I love getting so many new releases that feel very true to these Gothic classics that I love, while putting like some new fresh spins on them. There you have it. Those are 4 horror books that I read and mostly enjoyed. We had some disappointments, but we also had some really strong contenders for like my favorite horror, or even I think maybe once we get to the end of the year and I look at my list, The Death of Jane Lawrence is definitely going to be, if not in my top 10, very close to my top 10 list of favorite books of the year. So I had a whole lot of fun. I absolutely love horror, and I'm really glad that I got the chance to sit down and dedicate like a week or so to just reading some horror releases that I was excited about. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below letting me know what horror books you're very excited to get to this spooky season, this October. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!